Okay, let's open in our word of prayer. Lord, thank you for this day. We pray that you'll bless our time together and the services to follow, that we will be directed to truth in your word and hopefully an understanding of the times in which we live. Bless us today. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, today I'm going to title this At the Brink. So just so you know what's going on here at FBC, here's some of the channels that we're on. And I have an additional one I didn't have time to put on the slide yet. But we have rolled out an app, and we're starting to populate that app. You can go to the Google or Apple app stores and get it under Fellowship Bible Chapel. Be sure to look for Fellowship Bible Chapel, not Fellowship Bible Church. You'll get a different one, I think, if you do Fellowship Bible Church. It may be a perfectly good one, too, by the way, but it won't be us. So Fellowship Bible Chapel. And you can download the app. Now, we haven't populated it with very many prior teachings and videos and that sort of thing. So we're in the process of uploading those. But it does seem to be working. I'm told by our finance person that if you would care to donate, there's a donate button there in the app, just like there's one on the website. So we've been working on this for quite a while. It involves a lot of technical things. When I say we, I mean the collective we, not me personally. So that should be rolling out. And then the other thing that will happen too, because of that, it was delayed for a long time because getting approval from Apple to be included in the App Store seems to be incredibly difficult, especially if you're a church. And I think we are filed under education is the way that it's filed in the App Store, the category. It just takes a long time. But now that we have that, we'll be able to create an audio file, and then we'll be able to push that audio file out to a bunch of different podcast platforms, Apple, Podbean, et cetera, et cetera. So if you have app platforms, I think there'll be somewhere between 12 and 15 that will be able to be put out. And that will help some of you out who might have limited bandwidth where you live and you can't watch the video except in bits and pieces, or you'll be able to listen to the whole audio file, which is much less, a much smaller file than a video file. So that's out there, and just be patient with us as we upload things and get the podcast running. So we talk each week about the convergence of events, how quickly things are happening, and I will tell you that it has been a very difficult task to keep up. I did a midweek update this week. I think I also recorded a podcast with, you can find it at A Minute to Midnight, MIDNITE, with Tony from New Zealand. I think I did that on Monday evening. And then Thursday, late afternoon, I did a midweek update that was about 49 minutes long. I know that's pretty short for me, but so you can find those. They're on our YouTube channel. The other thing that happened this week, there were other two things that were sort of interrupting the flow of work. I did go down and clean out my office for my law firm that I've been with for about 20 years. And so that part of my life has changed. I haven't been going to the office that much over the last 2.5 years, like a lot of other people, but now I don't have an office downtown to go to. But the way that downtown Columbus has looked over the last 2.5 years, that's probably a blessing, because it's not as bad as it was back in the summer of 2020 when all the protests were going on, and you would go down to the State House Square and everything was boarded up for about a block or two in each direction. It was just otherworldly. So we talk about this Bible prophecy thing and how all of these things are going to fit together. And I love this graphic, although I don't even think it does justice to what we see in Bible prophecy. But this is a 3D graphic of a page of a score. And so the vision I have is a score page like this for all the different instruments in the orchestra that you can see three-dimensionally, but they all fit together and harmonize. And this is how the prophetic scriptures are. It is difficult to study. You'll have a passage here, a passage there, you'll have a pattern here, a pattern there, and it gets very, it is hard to piece it together. And people try. I get a lot of people's opinions about how things are going to work out each week, and I don't mind getting them. I don't have time to read them all in depth. I hope you understand that. But people are studying and they're working hard and they're trying to figure out how all of this fits together. And I am of the view that some of this will only really fit together when we're sort of on the other side and we're looking back and we'll say, oh yeah, that's how that was going to happen. That's how all that fit together. And so there's these, and so this is the grid that I kind of use just to look at some things with my simple mind: acceleration, ACLU, acceleration, convergence, logistics, and understanding. The real ACLU, not that other organization. And as the example that I've used many times is that, I'm nearsighted and I go to the eye doctor. I always get the E, okay, and the F and P, because I've memorized those over the years. But if I take off my glasses and I'm sitting across the room, I can barely see the E because I'm nearsighted. But if I walked up close to the chart, I could read manufactured by that little fine print down at the bottom because I'm closer to it. And that's similar to how Bible prophecy works, is that we will get closer. To get closer to these things, they'll be clear. We'll have better understanding. And that's based in part on what we see in Daniel chapter 12. And I heard, but I understood not. Then I said, this is Daniel talking. Oh, my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wise shall understand. None of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. And in Daniel chapter 11, it says the wise, those who are studying, they're going back and forth through the book, looking at these things, trying to put them together. The wise will understand and instruct many. So do you want to be, it's okay, I think, if you want to be one who's instructed. It's also okay if you want to be one who's studying to be wise. That's a blessing from the Lord. Either way, you get instructed by someone who's been studying or elsewhere. But the one thing, and I would just caution, I get an inordinate number of people writing to me that I had this or that dream. And that dream shows that the rapture is going to happen next week. Or now as we get close to some of the feast and, and some of there's a super full moon, I think it's this week. Kind of hard to tell around Ohio because it's cloudy a lot of the time. It was nice and clear the other night when we had that super full moon. It was just this huge thing hanging in the sky. Now it's been raining for the last couple of days, so I assume the moon is still up there. I'll verify that the next time we have a clear sky at night. But a lot of people say, well, because of that, and, then years ago we had the blood moons, and we have, the total eclipse that went across the United States, and then there's going to be another one that goes across 7 years after that one in 2017 and 2024, or 2020, I think it's 2024, and they cross near this area of Cairo, Illinois, and people are tying a lot of significance into that. And my view of that is, I don't know. I really don't know. I'm not going to focus on it. If it happens and then some significant event in Bible prophecy happens after, well, maybe we can tie them together. But you just won't see me doing it because I sort of look at what's going on in the world and see how this kind of fits into Bible prophecy. And now, I don't go through every scripture every week that I think might be relevant or touched on by the things. I assume that if you're listening, you're going to have a basic understanding of Bible prophecy. And so you're going to see some of these things happening, and you're going to say, I think these things do fit. So the example we use each week are the four horsemen. And so here's another example. This is where there's a lot of controversy. Are the four horsemen, have they been unleashed? That would mean that the first four seals, or however many horsemen are out, that would mean those seals have been open. And that's talked about in Revelation. Some people say, and there's very solid scholars, they talk about the birth pangs. I think you can tie the birth pangs in Matthew chapter 24 to the four horsemen. Some say, well, no, the birth pangs started back in World War I, and they've continued for the last 108 years, 108 years since World War I started. I really can't disagree with that, because the 20th century was a very bloody century. There were hundreds of millions of people were killed in wars, purges, famines, Holocaust, et cetera, et cetera. It started early in the World War II time, around the time of World War I with the Armenian genocide, which Turkey still denies. I was communicating with a lady this week who said that her grandfather had been sent away to avoid the approaching Ottoman Turk armies. We had another friend, some of you might remember him, his grandfather, similar, had seen his parents slaughtered, and then eventually was adopted and came to America, probably with a different name. But this is a horror, but Turkey denies that it ever happened. And I mean, you can go online and you can find these horrific pictures. So the issue is, are the four horsemen, have they been unleashed yet? Or are we're seeing, as I've tried to depict in this picture, the shadows casting a shadow back into our time so that we can see them mounting up. That's sort of how I think it's happening right now. But listen, with what's going on in the world, and I'll talk a little bit about it, coming famine, the black horse, it's hard it's hard to make a case that the horseman's not riding, especially with what we see going on in the world, where a significant tens of millions of people are on the brink of famine. And I think that's probably an optimistic assessment of the situation. We are in serious trouble in the world, and we will talk about that. But one of the things I probably don't talk about as much as I do, this is a very good article from the American Spectator, and it talks about patriotism. And the title of the article is Evangelical Elites Betray American Patriotism. That's just one item, and a growing list of antipathies that separate the evangelical industrial complex from everyday evangelicals. And one of the people that's cited in this article is Tim Keller. Now, Tim Keller is or was pastor. I think he had cancer. I think he may no longer be the senior pastor at Christ the Redeemer Church in Manhattan. I have not been a fan of Tim Keller. He is one of the leading Reformed people in the church, but I think, and I will give Brannon House credit, he wrote a book about Marchianity or Churchianity, about how Marxism had invaded the church. I think you can get that at his website. And it's very well done. And one of the people that he talks about is Tim Keller. And Tim Keller, he's been into mysticism, that type of thing, was very interesting. He always said, well, we want to be in Manhattan so we can have a church in the neighborhood where we live. Of course, he didn't live in Manhattan. He lived out in a sort of very elite enclave on Roosevelt Island. But he was into Catholic mysticism. He was recommending these people. But he's very, very popular. But I think there's very compelling evidence that he is a Fabian Marxist, socialist, and what he has done through the organizations that he had a sort of a missions outlook thing. I know a lot of pastor friends of mine were involved with him. They would go to his conferences. I never did because not that I'm smarter, I just didn't fall for it. And in the article, it talks about, well, just listen to a couple paragraphs out of this article. It says, and now I'm not having to have the one set up. Here we go. It says here, for a decade running, the nation's political division has rendered the thought shapers of the evangelical industrial complex, which I think is a great term, virtually unable to celebrate the Independence Day with a clear conscience. That disability undermines what the late Englishman and polymath Roger Scruton identified as an essential component of communal bonds, patriotism. Timothy Keller, the longtime superstar pastor of Redeemer Presbyterian Church in Manhattan, and the most influential of the Reformed resurgence among evangelicals, nurtured wariness for patriotism among conservative Christians. For the Keller-inspired evangelicalism, which encompasses ascendant elites in the Southern Baptist Convention and the Presbyterian Church in America, July 4th represents more of a problem to be solved than a festival to be celebrated. The love of God, family, and country displayed by most evangelicals over the holiday weekend soured in the mouths of erstwhile leaders. Patriotism, all but demonized within blue communities, was bound to find itself in the crosshairs of elite evangelical branding and messaging. Since 2016, the evangelical industrial complex has been careful to deliver two messages in and around elections, the 4th of July, whenever Donald Trump's name pierces the national consciousness. One, conservatives who vote Republican are flirting with idolatry, and America was never a Christian nation. Yet they will push Marxism or socialism, but if you do anything else, that's idolatry. Now, you can go too far in patriotism. We all know that. You can go too far, and that does become idolatry. But for example, here's one thing that they've done. This is the Gospel Coalition, and they came out after the Roe decision. I mean, the Roe decision came down, I believe it was on June 24th. And within a few days, here comes the Gospel Coalition. Whoops, I'm not sure why my phone. Yeah, you don't understand. You need to listen, lady. It's serious. Like, she never understands anything I'm talking about. And if I said that to her, she would say, well, I don't like being yelled at. Because I did that once. So anyway, so the Gospel Coalition comes out and says, listen, after Roe, well, here's what the Gospel Coalition said. In last week's 6-3 ruling, the Supreme Court found that there's no constitutional right to an abortion. Access will now be determined by each state, with roughly half poised to eliminate or significantly restrict the number of abortions performed within their borders. Christians on both sides of the aisle should welcome this ruling. Our views on abortion aren't to be shaped by our politics, but by the value God places on every life. He made humanity in his image. Every human soul possesses unspeakable value, dignity, and worth. But as we welcome this ruling, we must be measured in our response. Now is the time for the church to beat its chest in celebration of a victory in the culture war. This is a moment for us to step up in love. Now listen, this is a passive-aggressive attack on the pro-life movement. There's just no other question. There's no question in my mind about that. Because I didn't see that. I saw a lot of people celebrating that it was great, but what were they celebrating? Hey, what were they talking about? Well, now we need to do the hard work of going state by state. And we need to support Christian pregnancy centers, which are under kind of a withering attack from people like Liz Warren, also known as around here as Pocahontas, the senator from Massachusetts, who said, we need to shut these down. They're evil. They're terrible. They're abusing people. No, they're not. They're counseling people. They're providing support to people. And they've made a decision that it's not a good thing for a doctor to go into the womb of a woman and rip a baby out limb by limb and piece by piece. There's a very famous video out there of a doctor describing what happens in an abortion at Congress. You can just testifying before Congress. It's horrifying. It's just absolutely horrifying. And we see these clinics like that guy. Remember that guy in Philadelphia who was actually had a number of people ended up dead. He ended up in prison. He's, I think, doing a life sentence. Children born alive were killed and that type of thing. And nobody ever talks about that's just a natural outgrowth. And you see a lot of things happen. In fact, I'm going to jump ahead here and talk about this. So this week, a professor of law at Kiara Bridge, she's a professor of law at University of California at Berkeley. Now, Berkeley is a very prestigious law school, Boat Hall. It is certainly within the top 10, maybe top 5 of national law schools in the country. And they're always like they're always not quite the school you went to. You know, you didn't quite get into Harvard, but that's everybody's elite. Harvard and Yale and Cal Berkeley, and there's a couple others that everybody talks to. University of Chicago, which had an instructor there named Barack Obama, which ought to really knock their ratings down, but that's a topic for another time. And I worked with Harvard lawyers, okay? Believe me. And I went to high school with them, and I practiced law with them. And they're smart people, but I don't know that they're that much more beyond a lot of other people who've worked hard to get through law school. But anyway, she's asked a question, and they're having hearings on abortion because what the Biden administration wants to do is they want to make this abortion thing the critical central issue in the fall elections, because all the polling right now shows that it will be a debacle for the Democrats. And the Republicans should take control of both houses of Congress. That may or may not happen. If we're under God's judgment, that may not happen. And I'm not banking, the rest of my life on that happening. I certainly hope that it does. But the polling is just atrocious. I mean, Biden's approval rating is down in some polls to 18%. It's the lowest almost across all the polls of any president in United States history at any point in their term. I mean, Nixon was like 35% when he climbed on the helicopter to leave the White House after resigning. And Biden is below that. Although I saw a video of him this week telling a reporter that, hey, you guys, 92% of Democrats want me to run again. And I'm not sure what poll he's reading, or if he's reading it, or somebody's just feeding him information that he wants to hear. But anyway, so they have this hearing. They want to put abortion, like, for example, the proposal is we will put abortion clinics on U.S. Army bases so that those troglodytes, reactionaries in Ohio and Texas can't stop women from having abortion in that state. And by the way, there was this story about a 10-year-old girl from Ohio who had to go to Indiana. I did question it, and the main reason I questioned it was the one critical issue that nobody talked about was this 10-year-old girl has been impregnated by somebody. That's by definition in any state of the United States, that's rape. And so the question was about, well, can she get an abortion? The question would be, why aren't you prosecuting the rapist? And now it turns out that the guy's, I think, an illegal immigrant, migrant, whatever they call them, from here in Columbus. I think he's been charged. I don't know. I just think that everybody focused on, because, we got the right to an abortion has become a sacrament of the religion of leftism in this world. So anyway, so she's questioned. First, you're going to hear a question by Senator John Cornyn about, do you think that a baby is not yet born has value? Then we're going to see a question by Senator Josh Hawley from Missouri I just want you to listen to what she says.
You believe there ought to be more black babies aborted, is that right?
I believe that we ought to create the conditions under which people can lead lives that are filled with dignity and humanity.
And
that means being able
your way of thinking that happens when more black babies are aborted.
I believe, I love black people with the capacity for pregnancy. I think they have agency, they have intelligence, they know what is best for themselves, and I would love to create the conditions under which they can live lives that are filled with dignity and humanity.
And do you think a baby that is delivered alive has value?
Yes.
Do you think that a baby that is not yet born has value?
I believe that a person with a capacity for pregnancy has value. They have intelligence. They have agency. They have dignity.
I'm talking about the baby.
And I'm talking about the person with the capacity for pregnancy.
And you're not answering the question. I'm asking.
I'm answering a more interesting question to me.
Do you think that the baby that is not yet born, let's say the day before the mother delivers, do you think that baby has value?
I think that the person with the capacity for pregnancy has value, and they should have the ability to control what happens to their lives.
Well, and I just note you refuse to answer the question.
It's unbelievable. It is unbelievable. I mean, we are in such a divided country on this particular issue. Can't even talk about it. She won't answer the question. Why? Because did you see when he says, does a baby have value? There was a long pause before she said yes. But you know the whole time she's running through all of the intersectionality criteria things in her mind to see like, okay, now which one am I going to offend and I'm going to get in trouble and fired by Cal Berkeley because I said the wrong thing? And she could not say that the baby had value. Well, what about a female baby that's being aborted? Does that have value? Because that's a people, what did she call it? People capable of pregnancy. Those they seem to be women. And that's what the theme that Senator Hawley picked up on in his questioning of her just a little bit later.
Professor Bridges, you said several times, you've used a phrase, I want to make sure I understand what you mean by it. You've referred to people with a capacity for pregnancy. Would that be women?
Many women, cis women, have the capacity for pregnancy. Many cis women do not have the capacity for pregnancy. There are also trans men who are capable of pregnancy, as well as non-binary people who are capable of pregnancy.
So this isn't really a women's rights issue.
We can recognize that this impacts women while also recognizing that it impacts other groups. Those things are not mutually exclusive, Senator Hawley.
Oh, so your view is that the core of this right then is about what?
So I want to recognize that your line of questioning is transphobic, and it opens up trans people to violence by not recognizing them.
Wow, you're saying that I'm opening up people to violence by asking whether or not women are the folks who can have pregnancies?
So I want to note that 1 out of 5 transgender persons have attempted suicide. So I think it's important
because of my line of questioning? So we can't talk about it?
Because denying that trans people exist and pretending not to know that they exist.
I'm denying that trans people exist by asking you if you're talking about women having pregnancies?
Do you believe that men can get pregnant?
No, I don't think women can get pregnant.
So you are denying that trans people exist?
And that leads to violence? Is this how you run your classroom? Are students allowed to question you?
Absolutely.
Or are they also treated like this? Where
No,
they're told that they're opening up people to violence?
We have a good time in my class. You should join.
I bet.
You might learn a lot.
Wow, I would learn a lot. I've learned a lot just in this exchange.
Absolutely.
Extraordinary.
It probably costs, I don't know what tuition is at Cal Berkeley if you're out of state. I'm going to guess it's in the $75,000 to $100,000 a year range. You're not getting your money worth, folk, if you're listening to morons like this. And you saw her, she clearly, you saw her referring to her notes, she clearly had talking points. And it's like, okay, now I think I have this opening that I can do the transphobic accusation. And I can accuse Senator Hawley of being transphobic. And so she jumped in on that. at that point in time. It's interesting. I'm sure that when she left out of there, she was walking down the hallway doing high fives with AOC and all this. Look, man, I really showed them. You didn't show them anything. You showed them, well, I think I will tell you what it showed. But even Megan McArdle, writing in the Washington Post a couple days later, said, that's what I think everybody on the left thought. She did fantastic. She really stuck it to those guys, those troglodytes on the Senate committee, those white cis men. But then Megan McArdle says, the whole thing quickly became, she goes, I'm not so sure. The whole thing quickly became a Rorschach test. Many progressives cheered to see Professor Bridges school a reactionary Republican, but conservatives also cheered because they see a gift to Republican election campaigns. Unlike a Rorschach test, however, this one has a right answer, and the progressives have it wrong. This is in Washington Post. Moreover, the fact that they just can't see how badly this exchange went for their side shows what a big mistake it was to let academia and media institutions turn into left-wing monocultures. Within those rarefied circles, Bridges' answers were exquisitely and exactly correct. She allowed no hint that late-term fetuses might have moral value because that might suggest their interests could be weighed against those of the, pregnancy capable. Nor did she concede an inch to the idea that biology can trump gender identity. And when she ran out of patience with Holly's questions, she pounced in exactly the prescribed manner. Your questions are transphobic, Senator, and you are putting trans people at risk of violence and suicide. And remember, she said, by the way, I think it was a friend of mine, Pete Garcia, had something on his Facebook page this week. I think it was Pete. And he said, they talk about non-binary. But when you really break it down, non-binary means that there's a binary equation involved. There's binary and non-binary, which is a binary determination. It's one or the other. But they act like, non-binary, that gets us off the hook of the binary, this binary box you want to put everybody in, and it doesn't. They can't even see how silly they are. So Megan McArdle goes on and says this, yet outside those circles, Bridges' answers don't really sound so convincing. In most of America, does a late-term fetus have value is a softball. And when Holly leaped to ask whether women are the ones who give birth to a question few Americans today would struggle with, she resorted to extended question begging. That might be fine for a Berkeley classroom, but it just won't do for a political debate in which the majority of voters disagree with you. That's great. I give the Washington Post, or as I think Mark Levin calls it, the Washington Compost credit for publishing that editorial. And that was on Friday, July 14th, or 15th in the Washington Post on the op-ed page. This is a debate, and I mentioned this, and I won't go too much into it. A question came up, asked of the Church of England, what is the definition of a woman? And here's how the article goes. This is from the Daily Telegraph. There's a similar article in the Times of London. The Church of England has said that there is no official definition of a woman. In a written reply to a question submitted to the General Synod, a senior bishop said that although the meaning of the word woman was previously thought to be self-evident, additional care was now needed. The Reverend Angela Berners-Wilson, England's first woman priest, said that she was not totally happy with the answer, but added that the issue was sensitive. Maya Forstater, who we've talked about here before, she was let go from her work because she just said there's women and men, biological men, biological women. She got fired from her job. She eventually won her court case, and she now is executive director of the Sex Matters campaign. She described the bishop's answer as shocking, saying that the concepts of male and female did not need to have a formal official definition because they are older than human life itself. When the government redefined women through the Gender Recognition Act, the Church of England could have stuck with its long-established understanding, which makes sense whether your starting point is biology or the Bible. It is shocking that they so readily gave up on the definition of man or woman for the state to amend as if this fundamental truth did not matter. Now, I had also talked about a couple weeks ago, there was this lady who used to work with the president, former president, and she came, and immediately when she came and testified in front of that committee about a particular date in January of 2021, that is, I don't think it's designed to keep a certain former president from running again. It's a show trial. And she came and then she said, well, he jumped over the seat and he grabbed this and he assaulted the Secret Service agents. And the Secret Service agents have said that just didn't happen. But immediately, there were like 3-page spreads in the New York Times and the Washington Post and elsewhere saying, oh, she was so credible. And so this was on MSNBC. They asked Jamie Raskin, who's a left-wing congressman from, and I do mean the term congressman, from Maryland. They asked him, well, what did you think? There are these other things out there. What did you think of her credibility? So now I know as a trial lawyer, one of the most determinative things is when somebody will not answer your question, they are lying. And they have a whole different agenda. So listen to how Jamie Raskin handled that.
Bringing now a member of the Select Committee investigating January 6th attack, Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland. Congressman, thank you so much for being with us. We've all been talking for a couple of hours about how extraordinary yesterday was. Michael Beschloff saying, presidential historian saying it was one of the most remarkable days he can remember. I want to ask you, you were there. What was your takeaway?
Well, it was dumbfounding, although not exactly surprising, to learn directly that Donald Trump knew that the crowd was armed. There were lots of people with weapons out there, as Cassidy Hutchinson testified, guns and rifles and flags.
Fine. At the end of the hearing, the committee chair kind of made a open call to those who may want to refresh their memories or find courage, decide to come in or join in and add to this testimony. Was he speaking directly to some people who have already testified and perhaps were not as truthful as they could have been?
I think Chairman Thompson was speaking to everyone. The attitude of this committee under House Resolution 503 is we want all relevant evidence from all material witnesses, and we want nothing but the truth, and we want all of the truth to be able to come out. And the good news is that the vast majority of the people who have information have come forward and cooperated voluntarily.
Whoops. Well, I'm not sure.
Bringing now a member of the Select
would come under attack, but from my estimation, she's from a non
or assaulted an agent. They do not deny, however, that Trump was irate and demanded they drive to the Capitol. Is it your understanding, and have you corroborated from other witnesses, that President Trump grabbed the steering wheel in that limousine and got into an altercation with his lead agent?
Well, Cassidy Hutchinson is an entirely credible witness. She testified under oath in front of the entire country. Everyone was able to judge her demeanor. She has no motive.
Okay, so do you see how he did? They asked him, did you corroborate what she said with these other witnesses who were actually there and actually saw what happened? Because she didn't see what happened. And his answer was, she's a credible witness. That's not answering the question. That's indicative that man is a big liar. Not a little teeny one, a big, massive liar. Because he could corroborate it. They've talked to everybody under the sun. Why haven't they released all the videos? Ask your questions that. This is terrible. So what you see going on is you see Romans 1 in action, which is a judgment of God. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness, because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God hath showed it unto them. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse, because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. And this works, folks. This works on both sides of this politics thing. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools and changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like a corruptible man, into birds and four-footed beasts and creeping things. Wherefore God gave them also up to uncleanness through the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves, who changed the truth of God into a lie and worshiped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. For this cause gave them up unto vile affections, for even the women did change the natural use into that which is against nature. And likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the women, burned in their lust one toward another, men with men, working that which is unseemly, and receiving in themselves that recompense of their error, which was meat. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind to do those things which are not convenient, being filled with all unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, debate, deceit, malignity, whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, despiteful, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, without understanding, covenant breakers, without natural affection, implacable, unmerciful, who knowing the judgment of God, that they which commit such things are worthy of death, not only do they do the same, but have pleasure in them that do them. Now, I'm going to go back and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things going on in the world. This will be relatively quick. So we have this problem with the power grid. The power grids, there's warnings all over the place. But here's an interesting story. BMW to charge car owners $18 per month for heated seats. Now, a few years ago, I went to a conference put on by one of the big CLE education groups in the country in San Francisco. It's probably the last trip I will ever make to San Francisco. I remember coming out of the subway from, I think I flew into Oakland, and I took the BART over, got off at right in central San Francisco, and there were probably 24 homeless people between where I exited from the subway before I got to the escalator and stairs to the street. And it got worse. It got worse. That was 3 years ago. It's even worse now. But one of the things we talked about at that conference was the Internet of Things, all these things that are going to be connected to the Internet and 5G and that type of thing. And 5G was, man, just, I don't even think it was started to be rolled out back in 2019 when I went to this conference. So we have this issue. So they're going to charge people. Everything's going to be a service. That's what we've seen. People at Tesla got a note this week in Texas, a thing that popped up on their screen. Here's a picture of it. And it says, hey guys, if you're using a SUV, help relieve stress on the grid, don't charge your car between 3 and 8. Well, what happens when everybody in the world has an electric car? And this is evidence of Romans chapter 1. People have lost, they have a reprobate mind, which means they've lost the ability to reason. We see problems all over the place. Here's an article, I think, from this morning's London Times about Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka's collapsing. They put in this ESG inspired, we're only going to do organic farming. Crop yields fell 50% in a month. In a few days, they went from a rice exporting country to a rice importing country. The whole economic system has collapsed. The president has resigned. And he had written an article a few years back talking about how great it's going to be. Now, if you go to look at this article, How We Will Make Sri Lanka Rich by 2025, written in 2018 at the World Economic Forum. He's one of these Davos guys. You get, sorry, we can't find the page you're looking for. Why? Well, because now it's a little bit inconvenient, because now we have some things that would challenge this article with, things like facts about what's going on the ground. And here's what, you can still find the article if you go to archive.org. You can find this article, How I Will Make My Country Rich by 2025, said the guy who's now fled to the Maldives. There's a lot of other things going on. There's a heat wave in Europe. I mean, this is a page out of, I think, the Mirror in the UK, red hot alert, killer scorcher. But this is the Times of London, which is I think a more reasonable newspaper. Some people might disagree with me on that. Issues the first red alert amid fears extreme heat will be fatal. And it's not just there. I mean, there's Portugal's having wildfires. The 6-day, 10-day temperature outlook in the middle part, Midwest and upper Midwest United States, is they're talking temperatures like in Arizona in the summer. Heat indexes of 120. And people aren't used to that. I mean, they live in Minnesota where they they wear a jacket when it's 22 degrees out. Now they have 100 degrees more heat index possibly. Now maybe this won't happen, but this is just what was issued a couple days ago. And that's going to have a huge impact on crops and all of that other stuff. Now here in Ohio, it was very dry here for a month. And now in the last 2 days, now we're having local flooding and that type of thing. And I think we're supposed to get a couple more inches of rain today. This is Portugal, Spain. They're having fires and everything there, and they're having crop problems. This is happening. It's happening all over the world. It's interesting. There's this report, Global Assessment Risk on Disaster Risk Reduction. It's interesting when they get to the summary page, they make it look like the radioactive symbol. You see that? But look at what they say in this report. Most sustainable development goals in the Paris Agreement in some way return to questions of sustainable consumption. Yet world consumption of material per capita is steadily increasing. Yeah, because countries like Africa, they want air conditioning. We don't have air conditioning unless you have a power grid. And you're not going to have a power grid. Well, you might in some desert countries, you're going to have a power grid that works more of the time if it's solar, but the wind doesn't always blow. And it just says here, the human material and ecological footprint is accelerating the rate of change. A potential impact when systemic risks become cascading disasters is that their systems are at risk of collapse. And now you add in here, you have inflation all over the place. This is kind of an interesting picture of Christine Lagarde. Remember she did that talk in New York years ago? She was using the number 777, and she kept saying 777. And now she's holding up the euro, kind of like it's the Pope holding up a wafer during a Catholic Mass. But this year, I think this week for the first time for at least a little bit, the euro went down below the value parity on the dollar for a while. It used to be 2 or 3 euros for a dollar. Now it's like 1 to 1. Europe is in huge trouble. Russia has cut back on they have or will shortly shut down Nord Stream 1, which is the main supplier of gas into Germany and other places. Some places in Germany they're setting up heat rooms for people to use in the winter because they know that they won't have enough gas to generate electricity or burn fuel for furnaces and that type of thing at homes. So they're setting up centralized places where people can go. Now, Russia says they're doing it for maintenance. I have no reason to doubt what Russia is saying on this particular issue. There's plenty of reasons to doubt some of the things that are said there. But on this one, let's say that Russia's telling the truth. They do have to do maintenance. They're having trouble getting the parts. But then the question is, things continue to deteriorate in that space, and what are they going to do? What are they going to do if Russia doesn't turn the gas back on? Russia may not. Now, this would have a tremendous impact on Russia because when the Soviet Union collapsed, it took them years to recover because of deferred maintenance and that type of thing on their equipment. And if they just shut down and stop supplying gas, it could be It could take years for them to get everything back online. I mean, we're in like this. When I titled this At the Brink, I did it as a question just because people tell me I'm too negative. So I'm just, at the brink? Are we really at the brink? I think we are at the brink. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. As I'm sort of looking down time, I don't see a lot to be optimistic about. This is BlackRock, the biggest investment fund in the world. That's going down. Look at these graphs, though. I got these from Peter Zahan about projections on European demography. Now, what you want is a nice bell-shaped curve in demography because you want more young people down there to support old people. So there's been a couple of, the boomer generation is retiring, and there's 12,000 in the US retiring every day, something like that. This week, I guess I was sort of one of them. And, but look at this, this is 2030. You have a lot of old people at the top. Old people don't work that much. They're disabled, they have more health problems. It's just the human condition. And we don't have young people. Look at the smallest, just about the smallest thing below 80 is people 0 to 4. By the way, binary people 0 to 4, males and females. And why is that happening? Well, people are more successful, they tend to have less kids. You throw abortion in on top of that. Do you think the demographics in the United States would be different if 65 million aborted babies had not been aborted? Now, our demographics have held kind of in a little bit of a bell shape, although it's flattening on the sides. And a lot of that's because of immigration. Look at Japan. Whoops. Look at Japan. It's even worse. Japan that's 2015. By 2035, Japan might have half the people that it had not too long ago because of demographics. That's only like 12 or 13 years away. What's the impact on a society? And the problem is when you get to a certain, here's the Russia demography. Average male mortality is 59. They need soldiers. Where are they going to get them? Look at the cohorts down there. The last cohort that has any population in it is 25 to 29, and that was 7 years ago. Those numbers below in the red area have moved up, and things have compressed. And then you had a war where a lot of people have died, and this is true. Our country's in United States' military is in a bit of decline, partly because of the policies. The recruiting is way down. Well, how do you field an army? So I think Peter Zahn and some other people had made the point that this Russia, if they're going to go into Ukraine, which they've said they wanted to do for a long time, and Putin, who came out, I think, this week and said he sort of fashions himself as a Peter the Great type. He's going to build this big empire for Russia. This is it. Okay, they don't have it here. The other demographic I've heard, and it varies, but I've heard that up to 40% of the Russian military right now could be Islamic. That's kind of interesting when you factor that into the Ezekiel 38-39 scenario. But China's in the same boat. China, the birth rate is collapsing. That's what China looks like in 2040. This is what it looked like in 1990. But what you've done is now you've baked into the demographic statistics abortion, child selection policies, and that sort of thing, and it's a disaster. And it can't be changed overnight. So you see Russia, you see Japan, you see all these countries coming in, and they say, we got to get this under control. We want people to have more children. Well, talking about it doesn't do anything because you baked this model in for 40 years. India is on the same verge. 200 million, soon to be 200 million men in India and China with no prospect for a wife. What's the impact of that? 200 extra million males around? What do you do with them? A lot of times you send them to war. And we can talk about how that fits into this. So here these articles talking about the global fallout. Another government collapse this week, Italy. And you're seeing governments fall, a couple big ones each week. This is a big state of turmoil. Sri Lanka. And the question in the Financial Times is there a global fallout to this? There's protests all over the place. Netherlands, farmers. I hear there's going to be farmers in Canada protesting soon. Sri Lanka. Italy's having farmer protests because they're not getting the fertilizer. Fuel costs are going up. They can't afford it. They look at their livelihood. They don't think they're going to make it. Shinzo Abe, the longest-serving Prime Minister of Japan, was assassinated a little over a week ago. And now it turns out that the mother of the guy who assassinated him was involved with the Unification Church, the Moonies. And Abe himself had spoke at that. I've played those videos of that. I just think it's creepy, that think tank thing that the Unification Church puts on, and they praise our mother moon and all this stuff. And then you see evangelicals, you see Jonathan Falwell, I think you see Mike Pompeo, Mike Pence, Paula White, all these people going and paying like homage to this I wouldn't call her an antichrist figure because she believed that the Reverend Moon was the Christ. And she was his wife and the mother of us, the global mother. I don't know. And people in the church are doing this, and it's like, what are you thinking? Are you thinking this is apostasy? So now I want to do, and I can see that I'm running out of time, but I'll be done in about 10 minutes. The reason I'm doing this early, by the way, is because we have communion, second hour, so we'll talk about this. But this is I'm going to reference again, I have to do a whole presentation at the Sociable. Tim Hinchcliffe had done a great article about the World Economic Forum is pushing digital currency, digital ID, central bank digital currencies, ESG and crackdowns. And he references in that article a 2025, Future Focus 2025 report from the World Economic Forum, and look at some of the things that they talk about. It talks about, well, we want to develop effective narratives. This is what Klaus Schwab said. You're going to see narrative stories pushed on you because it's telling you how to think. And it's trying to shape, it's like, what are you going to believe? What we're telling you or your lying eyes? Remember the old story? And then, so look at this, protect against disinformation, misinformation. They talk about energy transition, ESGs, and that sort of thing. Artificial intelligence. This article from the Times of London this morning talking about China's new spy army. New York Times had an article on this a couple weeks ago. To their credit, it's all over the place. And what happens when they roll out these central bank digital currencies and they're programmable? Well, we'll just go to Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, if you can find any. I mean, they've all gone, most of them, Bitcoin is not, but many of the cryptocurrencies have gone totally bankrupt. The exchanges are bankrupt. Hundreds of thousands of investors have zero, nothing. But the technology, the blockchain technology, they'll use because they can have a record of every transaction and build it into your social credit score. And I would highly recommend you go to leohohmann.com, Leo, Hohmann, HOHMANN.com, I think is his website. And he has a great article where he talks about all this, and it's like, all of this stuff is coming. And so you have Tim Hinchcliffe at the Sociable talking about it. You have other people talking about it. Our friend Patrick Wood at Technocracy News has been talking about it. He builds on it. And I'm seeing a lot of articles. I mean, we've been talking about the Great Reset stuff around here for a good while now. And the impact of the World Economic Forum. And I hope someday one of my goals would be, that spider webby thing that the World Economic Forum has at their strategic intelligence website, where everything is linked to everything else. We need to do that for Bible prophecy. So we're going to have you click on Israel and you have this, and you click on this and you get a timeline and that type of thing. We need to do that. And maybe somebody has, I just haven't found it. But I think that would be a goal. Lebanon, they've shut down passports so people can't get out of Lebanon. The economy is collapsing. So there were a lot of things that went on this week. And I'll just sort of go about this in kind of a haphazard way, but I want you to understand. So this is you can turn the sound down on this. Here, let me turn that sound down. That's Anun, who is the sort of caretaker president of Lebanon, and he's talking about the fact we have this dispute between Lebanon and Israel. This is a very critical part of what's going on in the Middle East right now, because Iran is involved, Hezbollah is involved, and Lebanon keeps changing the line. It used to be they had the southern line there, dotted line coming off the coast. Israel had the northern line. There's a gas field that straddles both lines. They've tried to solve this. We have a guy involved named Amos Hochstein. In fact, when everything got finished, he left. Israel brought in a big, I think it's called FPSO ship from Energean, which is, I think, a French company, to do drilling in the Karish field, which is not really the biggest field. The Leviathan field and Tannin fields are bigger. But Israel has a lot of gas, not near as much. I mean, Russia has probably 14 or 15 times as much proven reserves as Israel has. But immediately when Israel came in and brought this ship in, Hezbollah started going, you better not do this. And so this Hassan Nasrallah this week was doing a talk on July 13th. And he said, listen, we're not going to tell the country of Lebanon what to do, but we have interests to protect. And if they don't do the thing, we reserve all rights to do whatever it is we need to do. And then that was followed up the next day in Al Akbar with a big article talking about all the things that he plans on doing, that this energy thing, they sent drones there towards the field on July 3rd. Now it comes out that there's been another one. Israel shot them down. Of course, Hezbollah, they're great propagandists, which means they're great liars. And they twist everything. So when Israel shoots down the drones, they see, Israel shot down the drones, and that scares the workers that Israel shot down the drones because they know we can reach. And so they spin everything. Nasrallah is the ultimate spinmeister. And he does these 2-hour-long talks, like once or twice a week. You think I'm bad? This guy can really give everybody a run for their money on using up time. So this is not done, and this is something I think that a lot of people are not talking about that much. So Biden went to the Middle East this week. Before he got there, Iran said, hey, we're going to, you need to be careful. We're watching you. And this is sort of how the Russians have done things in Syria. Anytime somebody's going to do something, Iran goes and does something to send a message. So the other thing they did was they sent a big cargo plane to Damascus just before Biden landed. They did that because they knew that Israel would not attack. Now there's reports here like cargo flights between Iran and Russia have now gone from like 2 to 3 in 2021, all of 2021, to like 40 this year of like 747s flying to Russia. What are they doing? So the claim made by the United States is that they're flying drones manufactured by Iran to Russia to use in its war in Ukraine. I don't know that that's true. The Iranian foreign minister came out and said, well, he had a very vague answer. They also released a video of a warship that will carry drones. This was released on the Iranian website. So Biden went to the Middle East. Here's some interesting editorial cartoons. This is from Arab newspapers. He needs to get his oil can filled. The people are taking shots at the Statue of Liberty, which is now under the control of Russia and Saudi Arabia. This is a Iranian flag flying along the Syrian-Turkish border in northern Syria. You have Israel, they signed a thing called the Jerusalem Declaration, so we don't want Iran to have nuclear weapons. Biden was in Jerusalem this week.
United States of America and the Prime Minister of the State of Israel.
And so they signed this agreement, the Jerusalem Declaration, a partnership, and they said they work together to confront Iran's aggression and destabilizing activities, whether directly or through proxies and terrorist groups, organizations such as Hezbollah, Hamas, and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. This is in contrast, remember, this is sort of in contrast to the prior administration's presidential document where they said the foreign policy of the United States is grounded in principled realism, and Congress wants the United States to have its embassy in the capital of Israel, which is Jerusalem. Biden will not say that. They went to the Palestinian area. The president actually got a...
כבוד נשיא המדינה, מר
sound off on this one. He got a Presidential Medal of Freedom. And then at the end of this is kind of strange. So at the end, he gets the thing, and then it's time for him to move over. And he's going all over fist bumping people and other things. But now it sort of looks like he was sort of reaching to give a handshake to somebody. Did you see that? Here, let me just back it up a little bit. Whoops. So that he's going to go over and sit down, and it looks like he's starting to like handshake. So a lot of people are saying he's fist bumping the air, he's handshaking somebody who's not there. They have this meeting about a Middle East Air Defense Alliance, MEAD it's called. The president of the King of Jordan has talked about how he wants to do that. Hamas is saying that they want to get involved in this. This is kind of an interesting thing. And somebody on Telegram, I'm not sure if it was Amir or somebody else, posted. So here's the presidential poll that came out about a week ago. And you see Likud is way ahead of everybody else. But when one of the local Israeli TV stations was doing it, so Netanyahu's party has 34 seats. But here's how look at the size of the bar graph that was on Israeli television. You see the little tiny 34 bar next to the giant 23 bar and the big 13 and the big 10? Who's making up the graphics there? You got to wonder. Then went to Saudi Arabia, where they had a meeting with Gulf Coast countries, and they talked about fighting Iran, and they signed some trade agreements. And there was also this agreement that these islands here at the south end of the Gulf of Aqaba, at the Red Sea, these two islands I talked about, the Tiran Straits, Tiran Straits, those are really Saudi Arabian islands. Saudi Arabia wants to use them in conjunction with building NEOM right there on the Saudi Arabian side, right here. This would be the Saudi Arabian side right here. But they need Israel's approval because Egypt and Israel signed a treaty back in 1967 that said Israel has to have access to the Red Sea. Again, I don't have time to go into it, but Caroline Glick at Jewish News Syndicate has a great article about how Biden ensured his trip to the Middle East would fail. And she's exactly right. She goes into it. She's one of the few journalists that's making a big deal out of the Lebanon border demarcation thing. Biden then went over to the Mount of Olives, and when they went over there, the United States officials took the Israeli flag off the presidential limo in Israel. This says a lot because these people are not very favorable towards Israel. Russia wants a Red Sea naval base. They were trying to get it in the port of Sudan in the Red Sea, but it looks like that's falling apart. But you also need to know that Russia, Turkey, and Iran are going to have a big meeting in Tehran this week. Russia's going to have side meetings with Erdogan and side meetings with Raisi of Iraq. And part of what they're going to talk about with Erdogan is getting the wheat and everything out of Ukraine because people need it. And so there's some challenges there. So I actually got through all my slides, but not in the depth that I wanted. So we'll probably try to do a midweek update this week if I can fit it in. But look, there is a lot going on. And all of these, so these meetings is the emerging Ezekiel 38 alliance between Russia, Iran, and Turkey. It's certainly leading that way. I don't think Ezekiel 38 war is imminent, but there's a lot of different opinions, like on everything else in Bible prophecy, is about when that war actually takes place. I think it's later, closer to the Lord's return, but we'll see. I won't be surprised if it happens before. Lot going on. Pay attention. Things are happening. Let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for this day. We pray that you'll bless the services to come. Pray that you always help us to remember that we are not given a spirit of fear, and give us opportunities to share the gospel with those around us. Bless us today. In Jesus' name, amen.